Have you checked the children? You're a little mad sometimes.
Hi, I'm Chucky. Wanna play?
Sometimes that is better.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Horror Show. I'm Cecil Laird.
And you got Jaime and Fuego, yeah.
And we are here to review a non-horror movie by any stretch, but this is one of Fuego's most anticipated of the year, if I'm not mistaken. Fuego, is that correct?
Of the last 2 years, because, it got pushed an entire year due to the situation that is still ongoing, but nonetheless, it's finally in theaters and also will be on HBO Max, so...
Of course, we're talking, if his shirt wasn't any indication, we are talking about the Denis Villeneuve Dune.
Yes, passion project of his that he's been wanting to make for years and years and years, finally at least getting this part of it done.
I almost called it a remake, but no, this is a new adaptation of the classic source material. And
Correct.
In fact, just the first half of it. Now, is it, having watched it, Fuego, is it the first half of the book, or is it a little questionable there?
Well, it's the spot where it makes the most sense to have a break, because there is a situation that happens with our lead character where some time goes by and there is, aging and changing, and so they break it off in a spot where it kind of makes sense. Like even with this particular version, which they did in 2000, this is the 2000 miniseries that John Harrison, director of Highlander, did. They broke it off in its two segments, kind of the way they break this one off. So it makes the most sense as far as the whole structuring of the storytelling goes.
Cool. So we're going to get into this like any of our regular reviews. We're going to talk about our overall thoughts, then the story, the acting, definitely the effects and the cinematography, production design, all that. There's a ton to talk about with this one. We'll try and not make it a super long review, but just so we're clear on where both of us are coming from, I have never read the book. I have seen all of the original Dune content. Like I saw the David Lynch movie, I saw the series on the Sci-Fi Channel, I watched The Children of Dune, but I watched it all once, and I watched it all in my teens. So I don't remember any of it, basically. So I was going in pretty fresh with this. I loved Arrival, so I had a lot of faith in the director, but other than that, I was pretty much a blank slate on this one going into it. So that's where I'm coming from. Fuego, where are you coming from on it?
So I'm definitely not a Dune expert by any way, shape, or form, but I would at least consider myself an enthusiast with so many of the themes that more on the messianic, like religious side that they kind of explore in this, more so than the deeply entrenched political intricacies, which is something that I think may be slightly off-putting for some people with this. I have only read the book once, and I was like, junior high, maybe freshman in high school, and it was so dense with the extent of its ideas. But I have revisited both the Lynch film and the miniseries recently, and then they also did a graphic novel adaptation as well. But I know that Dune is very popular within circles of science fiction fans, but in the same right, it's also very much it's an acquired taste, I guess, because of that density and because of so many themes that it explores. So that's where I'm curious how possible this is going to appeal to like a wide audience, so to speak. So
Yeah, okay. Well, fair enough. But you liked it, though.
oh, the film? Hell yes.
Okay.
Yes. I mean, especially from a visual standpoint, I thought I was just talking about my experience.
Yeah, well, go ahead and jump into your thoughts on the actual film then, as coming from that angle.
Yeah. It was definitely the most developed from a visual standpoint, especially when I revisited that 2000 miniseries that Harrison did, and it won a bunch of awards at the time. It had William Hurt as Duke Leo the father. It was good for what it was at the time, but boy, is it dated in comparison with the 160, 170 million or something that Denny was able to throw at this. I still really appreciate the Lynch film to a degree, despite some of its cheesiness. But yeah, this is definitely from a visual standpoint, from the grandiosity of Hans Zimmerman's score that we had for this and the stacked cast. It was the most developed and yet still a little inside baseball, which hardcore Dune fans will adore. But once again, I still worry, as much as I enjoyed it, how the casual person who just goes to a movie theater every now and then is going to feel about it. But I thought it was terrific.
Yeah, so that, I guess, would lead to me. I am pretty much that casual fan, and I will say that while the ideas are obviously big, and there's obviously some stuff that maybe I'm not picking up on the very first time through the movie, it was still a very engaging watch. I enjoyed the hell out of it. I thought it was visually spectacular, and the whole production design, everything from the costumes to the actual sets to everything, the way it was all put together was fantastic. The story was good, but it was, it's a story that we've seen similar ways done before, but those similar ways could have just been riffing on what they saw in the book, originally when they read it all those years ago. So it's a bit of a snake eating its own tail as far as that goes. But from a layman's perspective, I thought the movie was really engaging. I didn't think it didn't lose me per se. I just got the feeling that I wasn't getting all the eccentricities involved with each of the characters and each of the houses and all of this. Like, I felt like we got a little bit of broad sweeps, because I'm sure it's very, very dense lore, and that's tough to get across, even in a 2 hour and 35 minute part 1 movie. So ultimately, though, I loved it. I thought it was a great film. I'll definitely be getting it on Blu-ray and revisiting it. It makes me really excited for part 2 as well. Hopefully we get that.
Yeah, you kind of touched upon something that, if I'm going to give any thoughts about negativity and stuff like that, it does graze over stuff. Like, Lady Jessica and Paul are obviously the most developed people in this, and yet I felt like the Baron Harkonnen, our antagonist, and even his nephew, played by Batista, and some other characters that don't get as much screen time as I would have liked, and they didn't feel as developed as I know they are. But since I'm familiar with these characters from recollections of the source material being the novel, but then also the other riffs on it that I watched in the last year or so in anticipation of this, I heard that Denny said that he could have made this into like a 4 or 5 hour movie, just this part of it. And so that's where I did feel like, and then we'll get into it with the editing and stuff, that there were certain bits that, they could have developed characters more. There were certain beats that were kind of glossed over. I didn't think the Baron had as much screen time as I felt he needed to have. This, in a lot of ways, felt like a lot of setup for what they still don't know if they'll be able to make, these other entries. It's going to depend on the performance of box office for this one. So,
well, let's get into the story. Again, Dune is a classic story. It's galactic, as someone clarified. It is not a space movie per se, but there are different planets with different houses, and there is interstellar space travel, and the biggest component to allowing for interstellar space travel is something called the spice.
Spice must flow.
And the spice is readily available on this desert planet of Arrakis, right? Isn't that what it's called?
Arrakis, yep, also known as Dune. But yeah, Arrakis being the name of the planet. So
yeah, it all takes place on Arrakis, and at they give this whole backstory as to what's happened thus far. These Arcanons, is that what they are?
Harkonnen, yeah.
Harkonnen, okay. They were ruling over Arrakis. God, these are all new terminology for me, so they don't roll off my tongue.
And it's a lot, yeah.
but then House Atreides has now been given control of Arrakis, and the Harkonnens, or whatever they are sent to Pakin, and they don't like this, and so the big emperor over it all apparently has machinations going on behind the scenes that will, I don't think, ever really get exact explanations for, but I could be wrong because I don't remember the series. But nonetheless, this is much about these two houses, one trying to protect itself from the other, so to speak, and there's a big conflict between the two houses, and caught right in the middle are Paul and Lady Jessica, like Fuego said. Paul being the son of the Duke of the House Atreides. Yep. Okay, I think I'm getting this right. And
I was going to say Leto, yeah.
We find out very quickly, though, that there's something up with, and I had no recollection of this at all, but Paul has a bit of weirding abilities because his mother is a weird woman, and what I mean by weird is a witch woman kind of thing, as we know it.
Bene Gesserit, yep, Bene Gesserit.
Bene Gesserit, right.
Yep.
I forgot that's the term for it.
Night Sisters, and they're supposedly still trying to make a Night Sisters spin-off series on HBO Max. Like, they want to franchise the hell out of this, but it's really just going to depend on how this is received, especially by those, wider audiences.
Well, and you know what I thought of as soon as I saw this voice power that he's trying to have? I immediately thought of Preacher in the voice of God.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh, it's just a voice of God scenario here. But
It's also, and it was also taken by George Lucas. And when you're doing a Jedi mind trick and doing that push sort of thing, this is where he got the idea. So.
Oh, okay. Interesting. So Paul is caught in the middle of this war as that Harkonnen race is trying to take back Arrakis from House Atreides, and he's caught in the middle of it. Meanwhile, there's this whole desert race of people that they know exist out there, but they have no idea in how many numbers, and
the Fremen.
And House Atreides thinks that maybe recruiting the Fremen would help them win this ultimate war over Arrakis. Again, it sounds very complicated because it can be viewed very complicated, but when you break it down into its base parts, it's really not super complicated, which is why I didn't really have a super hard time following it. It's the same thing as when you read Lord of the Rings, where you're just trying to keep track of all the fucking weird names for everything. But ultimately, that's the story, and I gotta say, it was an engaging story. You know from the very beginning, because they're marketing this as Dune, but as soon as the title card comes up, it says Dune Part 1. And so you know from the get that it's going to be just the first part, so you're not terribly upset. And I gotta say, if it was a 2 hour and 35 minute movie, it didn't really feel like a 2 hour and 35 minute movie. I was engaged pretty much the whole time. So ultimately, story-wise, I was happy with how it played out.
Yeah. As I was, despite some of that skimming over that you had mentioned, and that's where when you have so many ideas, and back to the term inside baseball that I use, that's where those who have an understanding of the source material, I feel like, will be a lot more enthused with this adaptation perhaps. And that's where I still worry, because they're positioning it to be Star Wars meets Lord of the Rings essentially, and they want it to be that sort of big celebrated franchise by those casual audiences and stuff. But I felt the exploration of the whole messianic aspect, the fact that there is this prophecy on Arrakis that the Fremen are aware of, where there is supposed to be somebody who is going to come and deliver them from oppression, and the fact that Paul had the Bene Gesserit, mother, Leto's concubine and Jessica and everything, and then the fact that he is having these dreams, these premonitions, it's like everything is lining up for this to be him. Not trying to spoil anything with regards to this, but that's the themes that I have always found a lot more intriguing in comparison with the stuff that we get tastes of, the rivalry between the two houses and everything. But I for trying to make the storytelling accessible, I felt like it can be, but you're going to have to really kind of pay attention. So.
Okay, let's get into the acting, because I thought it was just powerhouse as far as actors go. I mean, Timothée Chalamet, I feel like, did a good job, but I feel like he was kind of in the shadow of almost everyone else that was around him. I thought Lady Jessica was phenomenal. I thought the Duke of House Atreides was excellent. Oscar Isaacs, right. For some reason, I always confuse him and Pedro Pascal in my mind at the forefront. Don't know why. But Oscar Isaacs, great. I thought that Stellan Skarsgård, a.k.a. Stellar Skateboard for any Comedy Bang Bang fans out there, he did a freaking good job in his not enough screen time, as you put it, but the time that he had, he was effective as hell. I thought he was a great Emperor-like villain in the background. I thought that was a really cool setup. We got some Batista doing work, but I feel like his story is mostly probably in part 2, based on what I saw in this. Jason Momoa has a really good turn, a character that you just can't help but like right off the bat, and
he's likable.
He's such a magnetic personality anyway. Yeah, it's as if you put The Rock in it's like they're the same as far as magnetic personalities go, in my opinion. And so Zendaya, much smaller role than I was anticipating based on all of the marketing materials, but I understand why it was that way, because all the marketing materials use these visions that he's having, and it's all these slow motion things, and like that's the majority of what you get out of her. So, but again, I really loved everyone. Everyone kept me in the world, and that was really important for me. By the way, we should say we saw this on an IMAX screen.
Yeah,
so we saw it on the biggest screen we could possibly see, and I'm glad for it, honestly. We had a chance to see this movie like 6 days ago on a regular theater screen, and I told Fuego I opted for the IMAX, and he agreed that was the right choice. And after seeing it, I'm definitely glad we did.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Acting wise, yeah, I mean the cast is stacked, and the thing about Denny is that he can do the big scale and scope of something like Arrival, but then he also did Prisoners, which had some of the best acting in any movie I've seen in recent memory. So you know that he can get great performances out of these talented people, and this is no exception. I mean the supporting cast is where I definitely wish that we could have seen a little bit more of, like, you know, Brolin as Gurney, for instance, and you have David Dastmalchian is in this.
Yeah.
As, I think the mental is what his title is, but he's a House Harkonnen person. And once again, Rebecca Ferguson is so ridiculously good in like anything that she does, and the nuance of how she was raised and how she has in turn raised her son. And
I loved Anton Sugar too. Anton Sugar, I think, was his character in No Country for Old Men. What's the guy's name though? Javier Bardem.
Yeah, he doesn't show up till late in the game, but
well, we get him. He visits House Atreides early. Yeah, so even his little bit, he's killing it, man. He's killing it.
Oh, he's ridiculous.
He owned that scene where he showed up in that fucking to talk to House Atreides. Completely stole that scene.
Yeah, and as he does in just about everything. So I was impressed with everybody. I'm still not the biggest Chalamet fan, I'll admit, and I've seen him in a lot of different things. I still really prefer, even though Kyle MacLachlan was a lot older than Paul should have been, he's still my favorite take on the role that we've seen, and so that's often what I just kind of revert back towards. And I'm also not the biggest Zendaya fan, aside from the John David Washington film that she did for Netflix earlier this year that I thought she was great in. She's
just good as MJ. She's a good different take.
Yeah,
she's not the MJ I grew up with in the comics, but she's her own take.
She has kind of a smugness about her that I'm just not.
I kind of like that though. I don't know.
Yeah, well, you know, to each their own, art is subjective and all that jazz.
No, yeah, I like it's Fuego, if I may. It's a different turn of the wheel.
It is indeed. But yeah, I knew that, especially based on, you know, a recollection of the story as opposed to extensive familiarity, I knew Chani was not going to play a big role. And she had even gone in the press and said, she's like, I'm not in very much of this movie, despite how much they're showing me. And I was like, well, yeah, that makes sense, because he dreams of her, and then it takes a while for him to actually meet her, you know, and they stayed relatively faithful and all that. So yeah, powerhouse cast, and even though I wanted more screen time from a lot of these characters, I did not feel like there is a weak link amongst any of them. So
let's get into the actual, you know, directing and cinematography, because this, I mean, again, I mentioned it earlier, visually outstanding, this film, and breathtaking, really. And the size and scale of it definitely warrants a trip to the theater. I know that it's going to underperform at the theater just because of the denseness of the story, but I'm hoping that people that go see it tell their friends, look, you got to see it in a theater, because and I can totally understand why Denny wasn't he one of the ones that was like, whoa, let's hold off on this dropping day and date online the same time thing for Dune. Didn't he say he refused it, right? He was like, no, this is going in the theater first. I don't care what you all say.
Yeah, and he's kind of strained his relationship with Warner Brothers because of how pissed he was. He said that he delayed it a year under the pretense that it was going to be a theatrical only release, and he said that they kind of betrayed him a little bit.
Wait, so is it not going to be?
That. No, it is. It is.
Yeah.
Yeah. He said that he okayed the delay of a year because he was under the understanding he thought that it was going to be a theatrical only thing as opposed to, you know, this dual release, and I think the dual release is unfortunately gonna hurt this.
That's what I'm asking. So is it being dual released, or is it just theater?
It is. Yep, it is.
Really? Oh.
Yeah. So it's going to be on HBO Max on Friday. And this
damn, like, serious? I didn't realize that. What a shame.
Of any film, as far as like big tentpole sort of releases, I mean, yeah, I guess people would, you know, Bond is only in theaters right now, you know, and there's been various others, you know, Disney did not do a dual release of Black Widow right away, if I recall correctly.
No, they did.
Oh, they did. Okay,
yeah, that was the first one, I think. Or no, Mulan was the first one. Anyway, who can recall at this point?
Yeah, but just the breathtaking, just enormousness of this, and with just how big this story is, with the themes that they explore, and yet also with giant friggin' worms, and these
I haven't even touched on that yet. Yeah.
like, landscapes and stuff like that. I mean, yes, this is one of the, if not the most, just screaming to be seen in a theater in comparison with, I know people have great sound systems and they have big 100+ inch TVs in some cases, but
those people might not be as bad off, but the average person has like a 60-inch at max, if that.
Yeah,
like,
if you're watching this on your friggin' cell phone, man,
don't do that. Oh, my heart hurts. Oh, my heart hurts to think about the people that watch this on their phone for the first time.
They're just that's cool.
God, you're gonna miss so much of the nuance of the big budget action and size and scale. Wow, that's a shame.
Yeah,
even as someone that now has a rather large TV, thanks to a sponsor, upcoming video on that. Watching it on the 85-inch. I'll definitely show it to Donna because she can't ever get out to the theater. I think she'll love it, and on that screen, more's the better. But let's segue back into the actual filmmaking. It's just gorgeous. I mean, the way he frames things, the way that everything plays into each other, the smoothness of how the action plays from one angle to the next. I'm playing on that because we had a big complaint about that with Halloween Kills. The choppiness of the way the cinematography came together, and this is so far from that. This is just peak filmmaking, in my opinion.
Yeah, and he proved with Arrival that he could showcase the enormity, I suppose, of this. I mean, when you see those ships coming down to harvest the spice, and like the first few minutes of this, like you definitely get the understanding of just how big this actually is. And
I feel like they... Oh, sorry.
Oh no, you're fine, and we'll segue once we get into effects and stuff. But I mean, the design of all of the sets, and the standout for this, even more so, I think, than the solid, great acting that we get, is the actual filmmaking, the cinematography, the look and the feel of making this universe just feel so authentic and so distinctive.
Everything to do with the Harkonnen boss man, I thought was awesome visually as well. Like the way he was represented. There's times when it pushes back across a long table to someone, keeps this person in the foreground. It puts him out of focus as he floats up and like raises up in the background and then just hovers towards the camera. Like such really cool visual stimulation all over the screen in almost every single angle. It's just phenomenal. I just wanted to really hit on that one more time. But
because like Skarsgård's portrayal and also the way that they shot it was much more menacing in compared with, the two previous takes on the character were kind of more of the slimy and gross and borderline silly at times, whereas this just oozed, and the scene that I'm talking about in particular, it just oozed evil in comparison for me. So yeah.
So all around great stuff there. Let's go ahead and segue into the effects. I mean, you brought up one of the big things is obviously the Shai-Hulud, or however you say it, the sandworms. Yep. And they're so cool. And what I liked about it, the thing that I wanted to mention, because this is an effects thing. So Tremors and more recently that Mandalorian episode with the sand dragon thing, they do a good job of when the thing comes out of the ground and it's interacting and stuff, but when it goes into the ground and moves, it should physically like shift all the sand around it. And they really did a good job of like when a sandworm comes through under the ground, like the terrain changes because it is hollowing out underneath and everything sinks down where it was and stuff like they just did a really good job of visually showing the scale that these things really do have. I don't remember how silly they may have looked in the Lynch Dune or even in the series. So
in the series, they're pretty bad.
Okay.
I'll be honest.
Well, they look awesome in this.
Yeah, I thought Lynch's take was solid. It was 1984, and I still think a lot of the practical and that set design and stuff holds up relatively well in that, much more so than the miniseries. But yeah, this one. The fact that we had these huge practical sets in a lot of cases, and even just the sheer scope of some of the battles that we get, and granted they don't happen until like the third act, but nonetheless, I mean, costuming too, I guess that's more like practical effects and stuff like that. Just the after having rewatched that 2000 miniseries and how stupid a lot of the costumes look, it's almost unforgivable. And in this, I was just immensely impressed throughout.
So, yeah, I mean, guys, the effects are phenomenal. The cinematography and filmmaking is outstanding. The set design, production design, all over the place is ridiculously high quality. And the acting and story, well, again, I think the story, if you had to point to a weak point, it might be story, but it's not because the story is weak. It's just because everything else is so goddamn high quality that the story is the only thing where you're like, yeah, I've seen something kind of similar to this before, but damn, was this done fantastically.
Yeah, and that's because so many have borrowed from Dune over the years, you know, with how old it is. But then also it explores, especially back to the whole, you know, what Paul could potentially stand for, and, you know, prophecies and, you know, saviors and all this different stuff. That is a theme as old as time, you know. And lastly, before I forget, the Hans Zimmer score is crashing.
I'm glad you said that, because the first time you said Zimmerman.
I know. And just like I said Leo as opposed to Leto the first time that I mentioned Duke's name.
I missed that one.
Yeah, it's something that I caught right away. So commenters, leave me alone. Give me a break, you know. But yeah, Hans he's got a amazing career already. I mean, because he did he works with Nolan primarily, right?
Yeah. Inception. I think he did Tenet too. All the Batman movies. Yeah.
Batman stuff. Yeah. But there's almost like kind of a tribalness to various flourishes of the score, which I found incredibly engaging, especially when you're on Arrakis, especially when you're understanding more about the Fremen. And it's like I want to throw it on when I'm working on stuff later today, just to fully immerse myself and just to get my way back to Arrakis, because I thought his score was just badass and very distinctive too.
Yeah, I'll probably start to put it in my rotation too for when I'm reading and writing and stuff like that. So, guys, I don't know what more we can say about this. This is a film that's absolutely not only worth your time, but absolutely worth a trip to the theater if you feel safe and comfortable to do so, because that is the optimal way to experience this film, let us tell you. And to those of you that think we never like any movies, here you go. Here's one that we really, really liked.
Yeah, and I'm going to be back at the theater in a few days because Catherine is crazy excited for this one too. So.
Well, we're going to be back in the theater tomorrow morning as we record this. Literally, we are less than 24 hours away from watching Antlers. And that's one of my most anticipated films of this year. I know Fuego's a big Creature fan too, so.
And I think it's Robert's most anticipated.
I think it is.
Big fan of the short story it's based on. So.
Exactly. So that review is going to be coming as soon as the embargo is lifted on that one as well. I'm going to try and turn this Dune review around. I'll probably put it up tomorrow, so that way I'm not stepping on your hail for today. And I'll put it up first thing in the morning. So go ahead and put your hail up as soon as you can here. But thanks, guys, for watching. Thank you to all of our patrons for supporting the channel. If you enjoyed this review, click the like button and subscribe. Ding that notification bell if you want to make sure you don't miss those upcoming reviews. We are also going to be reviewing the Chucky series. I'm going to attempt to do every episode, so episode 2 airs tonight. So Fuego and I may be back on this remote later tonight to do that. Yeah. So that review will probably go up Thursday if that's the case. And so, yeah. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. Until next time, I've been Cecil Laird.
And gracias, I've been Jaime and Fuego.
And remember, stay scared.
Fear is the mind killer.
Sure.